Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I am your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guest started her journey in the world of professional mountain biking and Xterra triathlon, ultimately becoming the most successful female athlete in Xterra history, winning 37 times, 6 national titles, and 1 world title. And you'll have to tell me if I got
Yes.
those stats right. Her journey significantly changed in March of 2008 when she was diagnosed with cancer. After relearning how to walk and giving birth to 2 boys in 2010, she went on to win gold and silver medals in the 2016 Paralympic Games in Rio. She will be returning to the Paralympics in Paris in a few weeks. I'm super excited to welcome Jamie Whitmore. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. And yes, you got all those stats correct.
Fantastic. My sources were good. So, Jamie, we love talking about endurance and the endurance mindset on this podcast. Can you tell me how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly?
Oh, definitely. I would say through cancer, it was uncanny how much being an endurance athlete helps through any kind of illness or setback. Because it's you just I was enduring pain for so long, and this was from the initial tumor itself, and also just after each surgery. It was being knocked down so hard that getting out of bed and going to the bathroom on my own was a struggle. But it's the same for when you're racing any distance, right? So you're starting out, you want to do a sprint triathlon, then you want to move to Olympic distance, then you want to go to a half. You have to start somewhere. You have to start at that sprint, or maybe you just have to get in the pool. And in the recovery process or enduring all of the things through not knowing what was wrong with me, it was just that mindset of knowing it will get better. I will make improvements. It's not always going to be like this. And that just ability to hang on when there just wasn't a whole lot else. Aside from my faith too.
100%. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. When you were first diagnosed, I mean, what was the emotion there? And then how did you rely on your endurance training to sort of get you through that emotional side of that news?
Well, it's an interesting question because it first of all, it probably took over 3 months for them to even figure out kind of what was wrong with me. It was one of those where I just kept seeing doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist, and kept getting misdiagnosed. And once I was completely bedridden, there was this, we need to figure out what is wrong with her. And then I ended up at UCSF where they ran more tests. And the problem at this point is I don't remember a lot because I was in so much agonizing pain. But I will never forget the day that I found out I had cancer. And 2 doctors had walked in to share what my options were, whether it be radiation or chemo. And I often talk about this moment where it's like watching a Charlie Brown cartoon and the
Mhm.
teacher talks, but you don't know what the teacher says. And that's honestly what it was for me. I heard radiation, I heard chemo, and the whole time I kept thinking in my mind, like, do I have cancer? Because nobody came out right and told me what was wrong with me. But they obviously knew. And so at the end, when I kind of came back in and heard them say, or I said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "Yes. Do I have cancer?" And it's one of those where you ask the question, but you don't really want the answer. And when they nodded their heads, it sunk in, and I remember thinking, I don't want to die. And that was the process that kept going through my mind. And it was from that point that I knew if I ever was to get back on the bike or if I was ever to return to sport, I needed to get better here. So this is where that mindset of not giving up, right? I always lived by the motto of any race, you have to finish. Like I've had a shoe fall off, I've had flat tires, I've had broken seat posts, and there's always just this mentality for me to get to the finish line. And a lot of that is because you could still make a paycheck, right? Or it's a series of races that you need to score in. So finishing is better than like getting zero, right? So it was at that moment where all of my Xterra days of refusing to quit no matter what, whether I came out of the water dead last or was not having a great day on the bike, that the entire race was still unfolding. And I can't give up when one little hard thing happens. And it was the same for the cancer is, I was so early on in that journey and I was thinking, if I want to get where, dare I say, Lance Armstrong got, then I have to keep going. I can't quit now upon this news. I have to find a way. So that's where like that mindset comes into play.
You left me a little breadcrumb there about knowing your body. And I have a similar story where 2 years ago during COVID, wasn't feeling well, short of breath going up and down the stairs. And eventually I said, something's just wrong. And so I went to my primary care, and luckily he's more of a holistic sort of approach to life. And he goes, Greg, let's just start eliminating the big things. And so we went to go get scans of the legs. Of course, we found blood clotting all down my left leg, all through my lungs. I had 4 days in the hospital on blood thinner from the spiral pulmonary embolism. But to your point about our athletics, I think there's something about all that training from day one to day infinity that teaches us that something's not right. Can you expand on that? Like when did you think in this part of your journey that, hey, something's just not right in my body and I need to find some professional help to figure it out?
I'd say it was pretty early on. Like looking back, the very first time I absolutely knew something was off was the World Championships, the 2008 Xterra World Championships. I came out of the water, I took off on the bike, and it was maybe about 3 miles into the bike. There was just this weird like pull on my hamstring or tightness or whatever you want to call it. I managed to finish the race. I finished in third that day. And then that evening there was a weird tingling in my leg. And it's one of those where I knew something was not right. And as I took time off and started up again that December of 2007, because it was actually, 2007, it was just like it was so incredibly tight. And it was one of those where it slowly got worse until it then very quickly got worse. And the hardest thing is people treated me like I was after drugs or wanting to offer me cortisone shots or telling me it was an ovarian cyst. And I just knew it was something more. But the problem is, as my health declined and things got worse and I was losing sleep and whatnot, it was really hard for me to focus on thinking like, oh, this could be this or that. In fact, even when they knew it was a tumor, I still didn't know. So then it was finding out it was cancer, finding out where it was growing. But it's like, listen to your body. Like I know when anything is off. It's the craziest thing. And I know when my bike is off. I know if a shoe that I just bought is off. When you as an athlete, you are so in tune with your body that you almost 100% know when something is off. And this is why it's so important to pick your healthcare providers to be people that will listen. And I've always been blessed with that. I've always had doctors that hear me out, even with my children. My children's pediatrician, they hear me out. And like a couple years ago, my son had appendicitis. And I got him into the hospital, got it out before there were any issues, and the surgeons couldn't believe it. They were like, wow, how'd you even know? And I just said, I knew by the way he described. And so I think we just live in a world where people just don't listen enough. But we do also have a very big epidemic with people seeking painkillers. But that was from the get-go. I always told doctors, like, I can't take anything. I get drug tested. So something is wrong. I just want to know what's wrong. Please hear me out.
Was there a point in your life that you kind of took on that mindset? Because I know a much younger version of me would go into my doctor. They would see whatever was going on, give me a prescription. I would take the prescription home, and I was the nail that their hammer fit. But now that I've got a little bit more mature and have a deeper relationship with my healthcare provider, at some point in my life that switched for me. I'm curious, when did that switch for you, or if you always had been this way, that you kind of your curiosity and asking lots of questions?
For me, I've always been that way. I've always been one of those that I don't like I don't like to take anything. I don't even like taking Advil. I don't like taking NyQuil unless I absolutely have to because, I need to sleep if I'm sick and I'm training, right? It's always that end result. And my aunt was always kind of this Eastern medicine type person where she's always been very prevent what's wrong. Like let's take stuff, let's eat healthy, and let's not get to the point where we have to take medications. And same with my uncles. And so I've always just grown up with just to endure the pain, because if you can feel the pain, then you don't push through something that you shouldn't. So I don't
Mm.
know if it was coaches along the way that always taught me that. If it hurts and you have to adjust your running, then maybe go ride your bike today. And I've just had good people placed in my life that have helped me make better choices. It's never been about winning. It's always been about achieving my best. And how can we achieve my best?
That's really well said. Um, Jamie, changing topics on you slightly, tell us a little bit more about you, your childhood, how you grew up, how you got into athletics. Give us a little bit more of your story.
Well, I am the youngest of two children. I have an older sister who is significantly older than me. She's about 5.5 years, so 6 grades. Basically, she was in high school and I was still in grammar school. So I always very much looked up to her. She was a big time swimmer, which made me want to be a swimmer at the age of 5. But then I swimming was hard. Like we had this coach that was so just like he just yelled all the time. And I don't know why, but I didn't like that. So sometimes I would hide in the locker room to not have to go out to practice. And my dad, I know my dad always wanted a son, right? Because he could go do baseball and all these other things. My dad's a huge sports fanatic. Like Monday Night Football was a thing in our house, like the Olympics, always. The Olympics were always on since I was a kid. So I remember being that 6-year-old sitting there with my dad and watching these swimmers going, "Ooh, one day that would be so cool if that was me." But not really having a grasp of what it would take because no one in my family was super athletic other than my sister. And then as she kind of navigated dance and cheerleading and all these other things, I dabbled in team sports. So I tried softball because that's fast pitch softball because that's what my neighbor did. I realized I was very small, and kids, it's like if you messed up, sometimes you could lose the game and it was your fault. Or vice versa, someone else messes up and then it's their fault. It was really
Mm.
hard for me to grasp this team thing of, not being frustrated with what other people do. So then I tried volleyball because I would do co ed volleyball with my dad and my sister. So that was kind of a fun family thing with our church. And again, realized team sports were just not my thing. There wasn't this level of measuring, am I getting better? So a friend of mine in 8th grade said, "Jamie, you should run." And her family, she came from her dad was a runner, hung out with all these runners. And, I liked hanging out with her. I was like, sure. So I would try all the different things. I remember trying high jump and hurdles, which were not for me. And eventually she did the distance. And then so I jumped into the mile and I was pretty good. I was finishing behind her. Then I went to high school. My geometry teacher said, "Hey, Jamie, come out for cross country." And I was already doing volleyball, but I knew I was the last picked. And so I thought to myself, volleyball's not my thing. I'm still kind of short. So I'm going to do track and field. And then the next year started cross country. And it was amazing at how naturally I gravitated towards that and how well, I mean, it's like, think about it. When you do well in anything, you're going to keep pursuing it. So I was one of
Mhm.
the only distance runners at my school. We were predominantly like known for our sprinting. And so it was like I got to rise to be this superstar. I remember winning sections for Division 2 schools both my junior and senior year. And it was just like, and I fell in love with running. There is nothing like high school cross country and the people that run it. Like they want to be there and they want to be better and they want to belong to something. And you can be a nerd, or you can be whatever you want, and you all have this camaraderie because you're suffering through the miles together.
You're taking me back to my childhood as you told those stories. And it is amazing how you think back and you find that one or two people that kind of pushed you into it and said, "Hey, why don't you try running? Hey, why don't you try this?" And then one thing leads to another and you fall in love with it. Um, Curious how then you obviously you're a huge mountain biker as well. So when did the mountain biking come in? Was that part of Xterra, or were you a mountain biker next, and then you started doing the triathlon? Like, walk me through that part of your journey.
So, I did so well in running, but the problem was my senior year, they still had me listed as a junior. So, only the California schools knew, and I only was pursued by California schools. And I couldn't figure out why until I ended up at Cal State Northridge on a running scholarship, which I loved the coach and I loved my teammates. But once again, I found myself at a school that predominantly was all about sprinting. So I got to shine as one of the few distance runners. And I had a great time. I loved it. And I remember right around maybe it was either my junior or senior year, one of our athletic trainers, because our school was very much known for kinesiology. She had, I think it was like an Iron Man tattoo, or she had something to where she was telling me about triathlons. And I thought, wow, I might be pretty good at triathlons. Like I used to swim, I run. How hard can it be to ride a bike? But as I tried to pursue that, I realized the cost of a bike was quite a bit, and I'm a college student. So
Mhm.
it went on the back burner. And when I had graduated from college, I came home and my dad, I was sitting on the couch. My dad was in the kitchen, and Barb Lindquist came on the TV, and she was being interviewed about how she was this collegiate swimmer turned triathlete, but her run wasn't very good. And I thought, oh my gosh, her run isn't good, but yet she's here on TV. I turned to my dad and said, I want to be a triathlete. So we went to a local bike shop. I opened up one of the magazines, and Peter Reed, I believe, had won Ironman that year or was a superstar or something. But I just remember I believe it was him that was on a Specialized. And I said, I want that bike. So we went to this bike shop. My dad dropped all this money to buy me this Specialized, tri bike. We got race wheels, and then I had to figure out how to now ride it. And I probably spent like a month or 2 on the trainer so that when I finally, because it was wintertime, I finally went out onto the road, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Like it was sketch. So I had joined a local triathlon group, and it was a 3-month group or training group that the end race was wildflower. So they taught you how to do transitions.
Mhm.
They taught us how to do open water swimming. It was like one of the greatest things. I met one of my very first like best friends and training partners. His name was Don Fonseca. He was this like 6'2" guy that all I would do is tag onto his wheel, and he would just like we would go so fast. And then I would pull him up the hills, and he'd pull me down the hills. And it was one of the most amazing things. And around that time, the guy who had helped sell my bike, I was then interested to him. This was my ex-husband. So we began dating, and he was big time into mountain biking. So he's the one that pulls me into that world, and it was so hard. Like, I would have to walk my bike. I'm pretty sure there were, like, a ton of tears, but he was such an avid mountain biker that he wanted me to love mountain biking. And so, knowing that I'm this highly competitive person, we came up with this game where if you do know trials riding, it's where you get docked points if you put a foot down. So trials riding is all about like hopping around obstacles, going over things, and you have to do it with your feet on the pedal and then hopping your bike around. So you could hop up onto a picnic bench I mean, sometimes they have some just epic things where they hop from pole to pole, but it's all on a point system. And I'm pretty sure the end game is you want 0. So we made this game where if you put a foot down, like to go through a technical section, if I put a foot down, that's 1 point. If both my feet come unclipped, that's 2 points. If I crash, it's like 3. If I crash but land on my feet, 3 points. If I crash and completely hit the ground, 4 points. But walking a section was 5 points. But if I crashed, went and did the section and cleaned it, I could get a point. I could get a point deducted. So at the end of the day, whoever had like the most points loses, and whoever has the least amount of points wins. And I was so determined to win that I would crash before I would ever walk a section after
Uh,
that.
and then you just played that game back and forth until.
Oh yeah, we had prizes. Like if you were the number 3, because whoever came on this ride, the prizes went to the 3 riders, and then they wore that prize, the next one, like on their camelback or their stem. But the number 2 place was this warrior little girl figurine. First place was a big dog stuffy that barked, and the third place was the pony from Toy Story, because you were the slowpoke.
That's brilliant. And so the final question in that is, when did you sign up for Xterra and realize that you had potential for the podium?
So I subscribed to Triathlete magazine, and my ex-husband, so my husband at the time, was reading through the magazines, and it was when Xterra was really starting to take off. And he was yelling to
Mm.
me from the bedroom, "What's your 10K time?" And he knew my mountain biking, because he was really good mountain biker and was teaching me everything I knew. So he knew I was on par with these mountain bikers. And then he asked what my, 1,500-meter open water swim was. And so he's looking at these times, and he's just like, "I think you'd be really good at Xterra." And all I had to hear was like trail running and mountain biking, and I was in. I was in, because my forward progression, I was trying to be pro in mountain biking. And I knew I was starting to go away from triathlon. So Xterra was one of those ways that I could hold on to still do
Mm.
triathlons, but have a love for mountain biking. Because at this point, I was all in with mountain biking. But what sealed the deal was my very first race that I ever entered. It was in Tahoe. I was second place overall. I was the second fastest finisher, but there was an issue with my license, because I was a pro on the mountain bike, but I was still an amateur as triathlon. So I had to be an amateur there, and I hadn't earned a spot in there. So they erased me from the results. Otherwise, I would have had a big payday that day too. But Ned Overend, if you don't know who Ned Overend is, look this guy up. He's like the Michael Jordan of mountain biking. He was there because that's when his time was that he was racing Xterra. And he turned to me and said, "You need to do Xterra, because that's where the money's at, and that's where you're going to have way more success than mountain biking." And so I was like, "I'm in." And then the rest is history. That was like the first of many Xterra races to come.
Wow, you were touched by the legend. Um, so Jamie, you're training and peaking, I guess, for Paris. Tell the audience what events you're competing in.
So this year, I'm focusing mainly on the road, because, as we all know, the older you get, the harder it is to hang on to your strength, and you only have so many matches in your little matchbook. So I'm foregoing doing the track, and also I get to walk in opening ceremonies, and I'm 100% focusing on the time trial and the road race, but mostly the road race, because in the Paralympic world, there are still some categories where we combine them. So my category is 1 through 3, and the time trial is based kind of like if you know handicapping in golf. So the lower categories have the advantage in the time trial because it's on a factor system. So I race at 100%. They rate C2s race at a
Mm.
97%. And I don't remember what C1s are, but it makes it really hard for the C3s to come out on top on the time trial. But our time to shine is in the road race, where we tend to be stronger because it's just an all out race. So it's going to be some really, really tough racing. We have some amazing competitors, and I know the US is one of the only teams that's going to have 2 racers that are C3. So I'm hoping that pays off, and we can get one of us or both of us on that podium.
That's awesome. We'll be rooting for you for sure. I'm curious, on race day at that level, on that stage, what's the mentality? What's your mindset? How do you get ready for when you wake up that morning? Kind of talk us through your routine until you hear the gun go off.
It's weird. Like time trials, I always feel so much more nervous for time trials, even though it's the race that you're by yourself and it's you against the clock, and you're just trying to execute your best race. Whereas the road race is much more like a chess match and poker thrown in there, because you could be hurting, but you don't want your competitors to know. And then you have to anticipate moves. For instance, like, you don't want to go to the finish line with the best sprinters. You're trying to figure out how to get rid of them sooner, but you're also trying to find people that are willing to work with you. And then you just have to capitalize. Like, if you did it, please tune in to the women's Olympic road race, because that is 100% someone that just, went for it. Kristen just went for it. And then there was a crash. So a whole lot of people didn't get to have that opportunity. And you have to seize those moments. But that's why road races are more unpredictable. So for me, I swear I've been doing this for 2 decades. The nerves never go away. Like, I still wake up with these huge, like, butterflies in my stomach, and the key is trying to just get myself to eat. Because you're just so nervous, and you need the calories, like, I'm so tiny. So it's really focusing on what I can control, and it's get the calories in,
Mm.
thinking positive thoughts, going through the race course, like, seeing if and playing out all these scenarios. Like, I think I spend my entire evening and morning playing out different scenarios. Like, if we attack and this or this person comes with us, if we attack here and this person comes with us, do we do it here? And it's constantly trying to figure out, will this work, or do I just sit in and wait? So, and knowing that if someone takes off, like, you got to go, like, because that could be their breakaway. So it's focusing on what I can control, and then letting everything else go.
So you hit on one of my favorite habits for endurance leadership. It's maintaining focus. Do you have any tricks or life hacks of how you can maintain your focus over an enduring race over a long period of time?
I feel like it's always before the gun goes off, that's the hardest to be mentally focused, because I think when you're a seasoned athlete, once that gun goes off, like, you're so in instinct mode. But I think you still will face issues when, say, someone's attacking, and people are just attack after attack after attack, and you're light in a lot of matches. You have to kind of, like, will yourself mentally to, like, they will let up. They will let up. I can keep going. But I think so it's a two-part answer. The beginning, it's music. Sometimes I'll have music. I will pray. I will have quotes. I will think about I will think about the Olympic races right now that are the shocks to everyone. Like, those people that took pure grit to that finish line to get that medal. And I go in preparing for, this is going to hurt. Like, it should hurt. No race should feel like, you're on a Sunday stroll till the finish line. Like, that, there's no fun in that. So it's preparing for the hurt, thinking about everything that could possibly go right. Don't think about what can go wrong. It has to be, if I execute my best race, here's where I could finish. Then once the race goes, when it hurts, it is fighting tooth and nail, like digging so deep and jumping. Like, you have to jump in a road race. If they go, you have to get on a wheel as fast as you can and just go. And as soon as you see someone starting to pop off a wheel, you got to go around them and get on that next wheel, because as soon as a gap opens, you may never see those people again. So it's being willing to hurt. And I have all of the men's steeplechase race, and I have the 100, and I have all of these races saved into my phone, because, like, that's just the hugest motivation. I mean, the men's 1500, how incredible is that?
Mm.
Like, to come from, like, way back, like mid pack, let's say mid pack, and then to just not give up for 4 laps, knowing that you were so many steps behind those two, the leader, the Norwegian. And it was just that refusal to, like, the race was not over until you cross the finish line. And that's how you always have to take every race. It is not over until you cross that finish line.
That's very well said. So, Jamie, you wake up the day after your race, you got the gold medal on your bedside table. What's the next 10 days look like? Is it relaxation and, vacation, or are you on to the next thing?
Yeah, we joke because when I did win the gold medal in Rio, we were able to stay. I think I was in Rio for maybe 2 more days. I came home and I had this long list of groceries my dad had sent, like, and I had a sick kid. So there was there was 0 time that I truly enjoyed that gold medal because for 2 days I was in Rio and nobody knows, right? Like I'm off vacationing on the beach, whatever. And then you fly home, you get off the plane and you're 100% 24/7 mom. So, like, and I remember posting about it. I had this long list of toilet paper and cough medicine and food because our fridge was empty. And oh, by the way, Ryder's sick. And so I came home to that. And I remember just thinking, like, yeah, do you ever really enjoy that? And I know this year our world championships is actually after Paris. So for me, whatever happens, like I'm going to Normandy with my kids because this has been on a bucket list forever. I have a huge World War II buff son. Like he's just so into World War II. And we're going to go ride along all of the area that, World War II existed. And he will share all of his knowledge. And then I meet up with a teammate and we drive to Switzerland for the next race.
That's awesome. So 10 years from now, you wake up, what are you up to? What are you doing? What are your hobbies?
I will still always be riding my bike. Like I love, love, love riding my bike. And getting cancer was something that fully made me aware of that. And it's weird because I tell people when I raced pro, there were days it was so hard to get motivated to go out, like the winter months or whatever. It's cold. I'm just tired because day in and day out, I didn't like swimming in a pool. Open water would be cold, and I was terrified of open water. Like there was just a million reasons that like I didn't want to be doing what I did, right? And then there would be the few times that I'm just like, yes, today was an awesome workout. But then for 3 years, I did not ride my bike. For an entire year, I didn't even know if I was gonna live. And then I became a mom, and there's all of that mixed into there. But 3 years, I did not ride a bike, and all I wanted to do was ride a bike. And the fact that I can't run, I can never feel that feeling of running, which was so my passion in life, that every day that I get on my bike, even if it is a bad day, it is an amazing day to be on my bike. And it's this weird mind shift that I've had because it was taken away from me, right? And then there was doubt and there was wondering and all this kind of stuff. And so the fact that I have it back in my life, there just is never a day. Like there are hard workout days and there are days I'm not feeling great in my workout. But as the famous Walton always said, today I get to ride my bike. Like I get to ride my bike today. And that's how I look at it. So I know in 10 years, I will still be riding my bike, probably racing my kids because they always say how they can outrun me. And I tell them how I can outbike them. But, and then I'd love to see myself more involved in coaching. I volunteer my time at a middle school. I coach cross country and track as much as I'm around. And then I'm trying to launch a program that goes into schools and teaches kids about disabilities and the Paralympics. So I like to bring in all of my equipment because
Mm.
there are so many things that can inspire kids. It's to have compassion for those that have a disability so that having a disability isn't weird to kids. Like my kids look at anyone missing a limb or in a wheelchair and it's nothing to them, right? They're so used to it. It's just like seeing people with different colored hair. There's not this awkwardness. And they know how to talk to them like they're a regular person, which we all are. And then there's this inspiring people that you can overcome setbacks in life, right? Like you may come from a broken home, you may be struggling in this subject or you might be having a hard time here, but it's about being just overcoming, finding a different path. It's trying to teach kids that. And then plain and simple, like how cool is it that all these people with disabilities go out there and like crush sports? Like I tell people, the
Mm.
para world is no less competitive than the pro world. We're just all doing it with something missing right? Like your day is already harder than an able-bodied person because you got to hop around on one leg, or you don't have a hand, or you're visually impaired. And then you're this amazing athlete on top of that. Like, right? This competitive athlete. And then the fourth thing is also teaching kids that all of this adaptive equipment is because somebody thought outside the box. I'm able to ride a bike with 1.5 legs because somebody designed an AFO for me to walk and an AFO for me to ride a bike. And the same goes for anybody with prosthetics. Like, you look at the blades, you look at just a normal walking prosthetic. Or how about, like, my teammates that are in wheelchairs can ride a hand cycle. They can go out there and I can ride with my buddy in a wheelchair because there is a device that was designed for him. And so it's inspiring kids of any, like, STEM program or whatever, that you can go into aerodynamics. You could go into, like, making the future better for everyone by just thinking outside of the box.
Jamie, it's so powerful. And you've got my inspiration going. My older brother is mentally handicapped and he had a birth defect. And so my kids see him as a regular human being and know how to interact with people with disabilities and think net, don't think anything other than positivity. And the other thing he gives me in my life is just my overall positivity, because I do get the chance to host a podcast, to go on my bike, to go for a run, to go out with my friends. And he's as happy as he can be every day, and he can barely see and get around on his bike, but he wakes up with joy every single morning. And your inspiration that you just gave over really hit me and got very deep, and you could probably hear it in my voice. um, Jamie, audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Sorry, I'm not really on the X or whatever it's called now. That's never been my forte, but I always invite people. I get a lot of questions just about when anyone's come into drop foot or some sort of new disability, or the fact that I ride my bike. Uh, I get a lot of questions like that, and I try to read through all of them and answer. And my kids help me with some stuff sometimes, but it's I like to be open, and I like to be inviting to people that are just curious, and and educate, right? The more knowledge is power, as I tell my kids. When you know things, um, then you can get ahead in life. So educating people on what the Paralympics is about. Like, I think the most common mistake everyone always makes is, oh, you're going to the Olympics. And it's not to downplay the Paralympics. It's just that, understand, no, I'm going to the Paralympics. It's not the same. It is different, but para means alongside. So that's why it's called the Paralympics. We compete alongside our able-bodied counterparts. And it's hard because people who've been around me a lot, I keep correcting and say, it's the Paralympics. I'm going to the Paralympics. And it's just because I want to educate people. I want them to understand that their friend is going to the Paralympics. And I'm proud of that, because again, if you have the opportunity to tune in, you don't even have to watch me race. Watch goalball, watch wheelchair rugby, watch wheelchair basketball. And mind I tell you, wheelchair basketball, they are shooting the same height hoop as people who are like 7 foot and walk up and could just like dunk that. They're in wheelchairs. So they're dribbling a ball and they're rolling around in wheelchairs and then shooting that same distance from lower down. Sit volleyball. These sports are incredibly impressive to watch. I have teammates that have one leg. They pedal a bike with one leg. It is the most, and I mean, like, I have a little bit of a second leg. I'm not far off the one leg, and I know how hard it is for me. So to see my teammate literally pedal with one leg, I'm always just like, you rock. You rock. Or my hand cycle friends. I have climbed all the way up Pikes Peak, and if you don't know, it's one of the taller mountains in Colorado Springs. And my teammate and I, well, there were 3 of us actually, my one-legged friend, my hand cycling buddy, and me, we rode to the top of that. And I mean, imagine pedaling anywhere with your arms, and this was 20 miles uphill. Like there's no relief. It took 3 or 4 hours to get to the top of that mountain at my hand cycle friend's pace, but it was just so impressive. I'm always impressed by people all the time. So watch the Paralympics. You will not walk away uninspired. I can promise you that.
Yeah, there's no question. It is inspirational. And in fact, it reminds me of my first triathlon. I did the escape from Alcatraz and I was raising money for the Challenge Athletes Foundation. And there was a gentleman, this
Yep.
guy, One Arm Willie, who demolished me in the swim. And I still think about that before every Ironman race or triathlon that I do. That, granted, his fitness was a little bit better than mine, but he was doing it with one extremity missing, and it's so impressive. So, to our audience members, yes, please tune into the Paralympics. Please follow Jamie. If you like this show, subscribe to us, share it with your friends. Let's get this message spread. Jamie, our conversation starting from the endurance mindset, and we talked about always finishing your races and what mentality we needed to do that with broken saddles and all types of issues that we have on our bikes. And we got into some great conversation around choosing your right health provider and asking good questions and being able to listen. And then we really finished it off with this inspirational discussion around disabilities and the Paralympics and keeping a positive attitude. It's been an honor having you on my show. Good luck in Paris. I'll be watching you and rooting for you. And I can't wait to see that gold medal put around your neck.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.